All right, we are now live.
Great. Katie, can you please start us off with roll call?
Yes. Mr. Badger?
You're on mute.
Okay.
I'm here.
Mr. Bleefeld?
I'm here.
Mr. Frank?
Here.
Mrs. Ginsburg?
Here.
Mrs. Heyman?
Here.
Ms. Kalianikis?
Here.
Mr. Stoloff?
Here.
Mrs. Walsh?
Present.
Mr. Antonio?
Here.
Sachi Meda?
Here.
9 present, 0 absent, and 1 student board rep tonight.
All right, it's time for the Pledge of Allegiance. Can we please have the flag? And say along with me, I pledge
I
allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone to the July 19th, 2021 special meeting of the Wissahickon School District's Board of Directors. Tonight, we will be voting on items reviewed at last week's special meeting on July 12th, as well as a couple new items that have come up since then. I should also note that the board met in executive session earlier this evening to discuss legal and personnel matters. Item 2 simply notes our meeting last week, and item 3 on the agenda lists our upcoming meetings through the end of August. So now I'll hand it over to Jim for our presentation this evening, which is a recap of the district's recommended health and safety plan and teaching and learning plan for the upcoming school year, which the board will formally vote on later tonight. Jim?
Okay, here you go. Let me see if I can. Is that shared?
Nope.
How's that?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so what we're intending to do tonight is not recap everything that we discussed last Monday, but rather give a summary of that presentation, a summary of the various recommendations, and then add in there some a look at some questions that came up either at that meeting or subsequent to that meeting. So that's what we'll do. We'll summarize. We'll address some more questions, and then we do have that vote, as Joe noted, on the 2 documents, the 7-1, which is the health and safety plan, and 7-2, which is the instructional plan. And we will review those in this presentation as well. So as a refresher, the recommendations with regard to health and safety center around, obviously, the most, shall we say, the topic that gets the most attention is masking, and the recommendation for masking in grades K to 5 is to require it of all individuals in the school through December, and at some point in January we'll be able to transition on the as long as vaccines have been made available to those under 12. That's the tricky part now, is that as of now, anybody under 12 can't get the vaccine, and it appears that it's going to be made available in say November-ish. So if we can work on that assumption, once the vaccine is made available and we have a little bit of time for everybody to go get it, we're not going to require the vaccine, but that will mean that we can relax the masking requirement. Our projection is sometime in January. Now, it's also important to note that that also presumes that there won't be any agency anywhere, federal level, state level, or county level, that steps in and requires masking again, such as what happened this past year. So our local plan is to carry forth with masks through or into January until such time as we can get everybody vaccinated if they want to. But again, I want to be clear that something could happen. There could be a huge development with COVID. There could be some agency that says something somewhere. So this is just our local plan. The recommendation in grade 6 is the same in some sense. That is, when 6th graders are in a classroom, We will require masks. We will not require masks when they are in common areas because grade 7th and 8th grade or 7th and 8th grade students will not be required to wear masks. This is grade 6 is probably the most complicated of all of our challenges because it's in a school with 2 other grades. There is some self-contained time, basically in a classroom, or maybe a couple other times during the day. But for the most part, there are also integrated times, such as hallways. Not always. In grade 6, most of the hallways are self-contained and kind of contained over to one part of the building, but there could easily be other students in the hallway. We'll talk about a frequently asked question later, but one of the rationales for grade 6 in the classroom is that that's when there'll be close contact because there'll be well more than 15 minutes at a time. And you will be around people who definitely haven't been vaccinated because they're all under 12. In the hallway, you don't have close contact. Yes, you're close, but you're passing. You might be in close contact for all of 10 seconds. And that's a significantly different sort of circumstances there. The recommendation for grades 7 to 12 is optional. That we're not going to require the masks because, and our philosophy there is that anybody who wanted to be vaccinated in those grades has had the opportunity to be vaccinated. Now, one piece of all of these is the busing, and we, as you recall, last Monday we weren't quite clear what the rules were going to be on busing, and we can say that at the moment it might be the case that masks are required on all buses, and that's currently what the thinking is because of a CDC order that applied to different transit options, trains, buses, and things, and that might filter down to school buses. If that CDC order does not apply to us, then we are going to require the masks on grades K to 5 buses until January again, and it would not be required on middle school or high school buses for the same reason in grade 6 is that there will be an integrated environment. So there's going to be more to come on busing, but I can just say that we'll follow whatever direction is given to us or whatever is interpreted that CDC order to apply to us here in Wissahickon. The health and safety plan also has other mitigation protocols. We won't go into all of them right now, but things like distancing won't be the same as last year. We are going to go back to what's going to look much more like normal distancing. We will not have 6 feet between desks. We are going to try to do things like get outside as often as we can. That's an example, by the way, of something we tried doing, and we may carry that over even post-COVID because that's just a good thing to do generally. There's cleaning protocols that our support staff are really good at, and they'll be in place. We will have all the things like frequent and reminders about hand washing and opportunities to do so. All the things that we did this past year. It just won't be the distancing. That's going to be a pretty big difference compared to this year. The instructional plan, the recommendation is in person for every day, and that's grades K to 12. Oops. If a family wants to choose the virtual option, that will come in the form of the Wissahickon Virtual Academy, which is the asynchronous lessons that are carried out or provided by the Montgomery County Intermediate Union and in conjunction with MVP. And we are going to ask families if they want to choose that virtual option, they have to tell us by July 30th. We will immediately send out instructions as to how to do that. You don't have to opt into in-person. So you don't have to respond to that if you want to go in person. It's just that if you do want to opt into virtual, you do need to tell us so we can plan for that. So things that we talked about last meeting, the factors that we considered, we learned quite a bit in these past 18 months. We know we have to be flexible. We know we have to create for ourselves the ability to pivot sometimes on a dime. We know that in-person learning is ideal. We know that we can do virtual learning. if need be. And we're going to continue to do that, by the way. We are going to continue to have some number of snow days, like normal, traditional snow days. But if we need to go virtual for either weather reasons or virus reasons or whatever, we're going to retain that capability. And we've also learned that while we can do virtual and in-person instruction at the same time, that's not the least bit ideal. So we're going to try to stay away from that if at all possible. Now, governing agencies have lots to say these days, or perhaps in their statements, not much to say. So, for example, the CDC has come out with recommendations. They do not have any authority over us, but they recommend masks for anybody who hasn't been vaccinated in schools, basically under 12. We'll continue to listen to and pay attention to anything that comes out of these agencies, whether at the federal level or state. The state level, by the way, just last week affirmed that they're not going to have their own set of guidelines and that they are going to go along with what CDC recommends. So that makes it sort of easier, but sort of not, in that it's out of the state's hands now and into whatever CDC is going to say. And also we have the county level, which, as we spoke about on Monday, is this year it appears is going to be a little more focused on things like counting of cases, going to be focused on contact tracing, that sort of thing. Now, we considered lots of medical opinions and lots of scientific studies. And I think it goes without saying that there are opinions and studies that can be found that can back up any position that pretty much you want when it comes to COVID. We didn't go and list all the ones we consulted. We consulted multiple ones. These are also changing very rapidly and also pretty much by the day. I think it's American Academy of Pediatrics just today, or maybe it was yesterday, put out their recommendations for everyone in K-12 schools to be masked. And they didn't even distinguish between vaccine status. So we're not doing that. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about compromise and finding middle ground. We're not going to that extent, but that's coming from an organization that's pretty well respected. And we will continue to keep an eye on recommendations, and we will, of course, continue to comply with any mandates that come to us. And we did pay attention to our survey that went out in June. And we actually put a great deal of weight on that, because what it told us was that while there might be people on either side of the fence in terms of what they would like with regard to masking, we get quite a few more students in person learning if we crafted the recommendation that we spoke of earlier tonight. So our guiding principles, we went over this on Monday night, but we wanted to maximize the number of students. We wanted to prioritize those 329 more that would be with us in person. That matters. And we really wanted to try to seek a common ground. So we're not going to follow, for example, masking for everybody. We are going to change and have no masking outdoors when you're in recess. So there's ways to find a common ground. There's ways to get these additional 329 students in and really and maximize how many students we have learning in person. So we had questions either at the meeting or since. Some of the most frequently ones, we can't answer them all. They're on the website, the ones we've gathered. For example, there was a question, what about separate K-5 classrooms? Some being masked and some not. And we did consider that. In the end, we can't recommend that because the classes are carefully crafted in a balanced way. We're worried about what would happen if, to that balance, if our first criteria was masking or not. Also, class sizes would become substantially more difficult to manage because there might be a class of 8, or let's say a section of 8, or a section of 31, and that doesn't break easily. And it just kind of, it didn't really lend itself. Some schools might not even have enough classrooms if we did all that. So we did think about it, but in the end, we can't recommend doing that. I spoke a little bit about the rationale behind the recommendation for grade 6. I know it does sound a little jumpy, or that recommendation for that grade does pose the most, so we say, challenges for us. But again, it has to do with how long you're sitting in one place, and which gets at that close contact opportunity. Transportation, we also spoke about that. We believe that right now we're going to go into this with masks required K to 5, and we believe also required 6 to 12. But if it's determined the CDC order does not apply to us, then the masks will only be required for us at grades K to 5 on the bus. There are some questions about what about using metrics, and I know that other districts in the area are doing that. The reason we decided against this is we didn't know how a family could make a decision about sending their student in person or not, because they wouldn't know when masking would ever get triggered, if it ever would be. First, it would be hard enough to find the right metric. I mean, no matter what anyone tells you, no one knows what the right metric is to all of a sudden start having masks required again. Okay, there's some ballparks, but no one knows what the right one is. So even if we did find the right metric somehow, the families making their decision about sending their student in person or not wouldn't know what the masking status would be for the whole first half of the school year. They'd know we'd start off with no masks, but they'd have no way of knowing if and when that metric would ever kick in, and if they would prefer to have masks, if they were in that 329 number, then we feel like using metrics would have substantially reduced the number of kids we have in person. It's nothing, the districts that are using metrics aren't wrong. It's just that we felt it wasn't the right fit here. Our cases will be tracked still. We're not going to use that highly convoluted 14-day rolling window thing that the state required us to, but we do intend to track them and communicate them out to everybody in the school community. Would venture to say probably once a week, maybe twice a week. Again, there were other questions asked, and that's the website link for all those questions and a little more detail to the answers. So sources for more information, there are these two documents in tonight's meeting agenda. The 7.1 is the health and safety plan. 7.2 is the instructional plan. 7.1, the health and safety plan, is a template that the state requires us to use, and we filled in as best we can. There's that CDC guidance. There's last Monday's board meeting presentation, goes into a little more details, for example, with regard to survey results. And in the end, I think this is important to just say, is that we know these recommendations will not please everyone. That was pretty painfully aware of that as soon as we started to sit down and craft a plan. However, we do feel it's the best way in this plan. These recommendations are the best way to optimize in-person teaching and learning, and for as many students as possible. So that's kind of not just the rationale, but the sort of why we landed here and how we did. And what I think I'll do is I'll stop sharing and open, Joe, if you want to open up the questions.
Thanks, Jim. So I guess at this point, I'll just open it up to board members who have questions for Jim, comments. Just let me know, Amy, and then Ronnie.
Thank you, Joe. Jim, so what are other districts around us doing in regard to going back? Like Upper Dublin?
Some have made up their mind, some have not. Last I heard, I think only Springford, it was for sure, or I'm not for sure, but said they're going to require masks. I believe North Penn is going to have a metric type arrangement. I'm not sure if everyone else is finalized yet. So I wouldn't want to say, well, District X is doing this or Y. I don't know of others who are requiring masks at the K-5 level, again, other than Springford.
And what type of metrics is North Penn using?
I was unable to understand them, and I'm not sure they've even been finalized yet anyway. So I don't know. It would have to do with case count. It would have to do with, rather than have it be statewide, it would be maybe even Montgomery County, could even be their community, more precisely North Penn. I'm not sure.
And when you looked at the separate classrooms for masked and non-masked students, like I know I filled out the survey. I think if I recall, I filled in my child's name and grade, like I put all that information in. Like if we had this information, do we look at it and say, okay, there will be these odd number classrooms? Like, did we actually break it down by class and year to figure that out?
No, because we didn't ask the question if we had some classes masked, some not. We'd have to ask that again because parents answer that survey based on, hey, are you requiring masks of everyone in the building or not? And so we didn't break it down. I mean, we could have made the assumption that they would have responded in the same way, but it's really not the same question because then there'd be lots of kids who know the kids in the masked classrooms in the hallways would be different. Sometimes kids come and go from classrooms. We'd have to figure out encores that it get combined. So we didn't go to that level of detail, no, because we felt there was too many other reasons not to recommend that.
Okay, and then my last question, if we get the numbers on 7:30 and it shows that we have a large number of students that do want to do virtual, would we be able to offer a synchronous option for our students?
Not this time. We don't have plans for doing that.
All right, thank you.
Ronnie?
I just wanted to ask my perennial question. What are we doing about class size? Are we trying to make them as small as possible, given the difficulties?
It's hard to answer that question phrased that way from a very astute former fourth grade teacher I know. We are going to take a look at our class sections. And I think one of the important things is we'll make them based on the assumption that every single student is coming in person. And this is getting a little into the weeds, but the reason I say that is because let's say that in a school, 15 students choose to go virtual for the first semester. We're going to save a seat for them in a classroom somewhere, whatever grade they are, so that if they choose to come back, that class size guideline will still be within our norms. So it's quite possible that to start the school year, there actually might be one or two smaller classes because if students choose virtual, we're saving a seat for them anyway.
Okay, we'll see.
Paul?
Thanks, Joe. Jim, I have 3 questions. First is whether or not we have considered air filtration systems or some sort of ventilation systems within the individual classrooms.
Okay, the answer to that is yes, we did. And I'm going to need Wade's help a little bit on this one as to the conclusions. But I think there's some filters that were looked at or.
So, yeah, thank you. Our HVAC systems don't allow us just to stick in those type of HEPA filters into the HVAC. They don't work that way. So we would have to purchase the HEPA filter standalones. We use them in nurses' offices and outside in the sort of quote unquote quarantining areas last year. They're very loud. There was a CDC article that was written about them and that it was a positive, but the square footage in that CDC article was 584 square feet, and it was 2 units. Obviously, our classrooms are almost, on average, a little closer to double that. So we need 4 or 3, depending on the size, and the volume of noise that would be occurring in a classroom. Specifically anybody who would be close to them, if you had to have 3 or 4 of them, it would be too loud, in our opinion, my opinion, to use them. If there was some type of incredibly quiet HEPA filter out there, we can investigate it, but at this point, we don't think there is.
Okay, thanks, Wade. Second question is, how will before and after care be handled? I'm assuming mask will be required of students in K through 5, but can you elaborate on that?
That's a good question, Paul. We actually haven't had the conversation with the health. I mean, at this point, it's the YMCA as the provider. It would make sense to me to have it that way. I think off the top of my head, we didn't, our health and safety plan deals with the school day. But but for consistency's sake, I think it might make sense in grades K to 5. I can't speak to middle school. In fact, I think middle school would not. But in any event, we'll be sure to have those conversations with the Y and get that out before anyone has to commit to aftercare.
Okay, great. Last question is, obviously, parents, families will have to make a decision and commit one way or the other prior to the school year. If there is an outbreak, thinking of a worst case scenario, our numbers go up. Will there be an option midstream for those who are in person to potentially have a virtual option? If we have some extenuating circumstances with increased counts?
Yeah, so the answer there is we as a system will stand ready to go virtual if we have to. We can't, other than in January, we won't be able to have individual students changing their mind one way or the other. So we're going to have that one change point in January. And then as a district, if the case counts get bad enough for it to be a concern and some agency somewhere says something, then we'll go back to 100% virtual for everybody.
Okay. I do have one other quick one. There was a question raised that there are some students that have individual challenges specific to their learning, and masks on teachers may impede them from being able to fully understand and learn in that environment. Is there an option for face shields for teachers to allow students to be able to see their, to read lips and to have the visual cues of them through a shield rather than a mask?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Other questions, comments for Jim? Tracy and then Zephy.
Yeah, so I just wanted I was pulling up some statistics off the CDC website. And just in the last week alone, there's been a 69% increase in the last 7 days in the United States for COVID cases. There's been a 35% increase in the last 7 days in hospitalizations and a 26% increase in the last 7 days in deaths. Now, that is not in our area. That is across the United States. But we do know that, that is something that can definitely happen here. And I did want to remind people, too, that last year, the CDC was recommended that we not go to school, that we do 100% virtual. And we voted as a board to task our administrators to figure out a way to get us into the classrooms. And I think we did a halfway decent job, that we were the only district in the area to be able to open our schools and have 100% in person offered in elementary, at least in the very beginning, where no other school offered that. I think Jim's recommendation of masking our K to 5 or K to 6 group to make sure that we can get as many kids in person is something that, that's what we were trying to do last year. We were trying to get as many kids as possible in person. And I think if that is our way of doing that this year, then that's something that we also need to think about. And also right now, the CDC is currently recommending masks. Now it's recommending masks to be worn indoors for all adults and children that are not vaccinated. And the purpose of the K to 6 being required is because they are not able to get vaccinated. But let's not forget, the CDC is still recommending adults and children not vaccinated to mask up indoors because COVID is still happening. The other comment that I would have is in regards to busing. So if we are requiring grade 6 to mask, I think my personal opinion is that the buses should be required as well. So even if you're in high school, if you get on a bus, you should be wearing a mask because there's 6th graders on there that aren't able to be vaccinated. Yes, 7 through 12 had the option to vaccinate, but the 6th graders did not. It's not that long of a trip. Most kids, the longest, it's about 50 minutes if you're on, the very last. And a lot of the high school kids don't take the bus anyway. A lot of them drive. So my opinion would be that for the buses, that the high school kids should be required to wear a mask while on the bus. If we're mandating that the 6th graders wear it during the day. And the other comment that I had was for the classes that are, the people that were asking about the classes for masked and unmasked classes. Like Jim said about the, encores, how will they handle that? Because some of the classes are mixed. And then also, the other thing to think about is lunches, because all the kids are most likely going to be in there unmasked at lunch. So that's another thing to think about. And I don't even know my opinion on that just yet, of if we're not requiring it at lunch, why are we requiring it in the classroom? And if we're requiring it in the classroom, why aren't we requiring it at lunch or to be separated? I don't know. But I just wanted to bring up those couple of things of what I found on the CDC website too.
Jeffy?
Hi. Jim, a lot of great questions. I think, and you said it earlier, 6th grade is definitely the trickiest. But I guess wanted to understand the rationale why we're not going to have the mask in the hallways. Is it purely because it's not, we're not able to, I don't mean to say police, but, check that? Or is there or is it because of the 7th, 8th grade? I'm like struggling with that one a little bit. Can you walk us through the rationale there?
Sure. So the hallways were probably the trickiest piece, and the passing is usually just 6th graders. Sometimes there's reason for 7th and 8th graders to be in the same hallways. And one of the things we didn't want to do is have a situation where 6th graders were walking around with masks on in the middle of some activity where other kids didn't have to wear a mask. We're trying to be sensitive to when we contain 6th graders who have obviously not been vaccinated, because by definition, then they just mask up, and all 6th graders know there's no identifying somebody for who's 6th grade, who isn't. That peers don't look at each other, and any of that. And so in the hallways, there could be 7th and 8th graders, and also the time that you spend passing somebody in someone's close contact space is minimal. As compared to in math class, you're sitting next to that classmate for 45 minutes. And so the likelihood of having integrated hallway plus the limited amount of time contact tracing wise led us to that recommendation for the hallways.
Okay, great. I get that. That's helpful. And then I'm with Tracy a little bit with the transportation. I read that universally public transportation, we should be masking unless you're on a ferry. But like buses, trains, airplanes, across the board is the masking requirement. So my struggle with 6+ on the bus again is how do we regulate that? And like, if
Yeah, it's busing.
I don't like, I'm struggling with how this will look like.
Yeah. Well, right now, the health and safety plan reads that this is for all grades, K to 12. Masks, or let me just say grades 6 to 12. Masks are optional all times, except while on a bus if required by federal or state law. And right now, the CDC order is interpreted to apply to school bus. So if we started school tomorrow, everyone on a bus would be required to wear a mask. But I wanted to be consistent in how we handle buses if we are allowed to, if at some point down the road that federal CDC order is decided it doesn't apply to school buses. I wanted to be consistent in our approach to masking on buses as we were in schools.
Yeah.
But this is a perfect example of an agency somewhere, in this case the CDC, issued an order, which is being interpreted as a mandate, to do something. So we're going to comply.
Yeah.
And so there will be masks required on a bus, all grades, K to 12. And then these questions we're talking about would only become applicable if at some point in the future it's determined that order does not apply anymore to school buses.
Yeah.
So we can cross that bridge later. At the moment, though, it's all required.
Okay, thanks.
Amy?
Jim, just following up on that, like, I'm just concerned in general, like, how are we going to enforce this? Like, as a parent, like, I don't myself go through the rule book and say, I'm going to follow this rule, but not this rule. If there's rules in place, I follow them. But there may be parents out there that say, you know, on this particular issue, I'm not sending my child in a mask. What is our plan for that?
I assume you're not talking about buses, but you're just talking about generally now.
Generally, yeah.
Well, let's say at K to 5, or even in grade 6 too, masks are a school rule. And we have school rules that everyone has to follow. And it's not like you say, you can't pick and choose which school rules to follow. And you can't wear offensive things on a t-shirt, and you can't wear clothing that reveals too much, and you can't hit other people. And there's lots of other things you can and can't do. And this is another one of those. And so we'll handle it the same way. And there will not be a choice. Parents won't have a choice to. I know there's been talk about we're not going to follow this rule. Well, we have to follow the rules. I mean, otherwise, there's lots of rules in a school and everyone has to follow all the rules.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Jim, just to follow up on Amy's point, if there is non-compliance, what action will the school staff take?
The same as we normally do for non-compliance. I mean, there'll be, in this case, it's a health matter. So the student, let's just say the student chooses not to wear a mask anymore someday, any day. Off they go to the principal's office to find out, like, well, hey, so anyway, or you first have a conversation with a teacher, like, we got to wear a mask, and they'll, oh, I forgot. Okay, then the issue's over. I don't really want to wear one right now. I know, but you got to, and if you could, it'd be better. And they put it on, and it's all good. I mean, teachers have this skill set that eventually ends with, I refuse to wear a mask, and I refuse no matter what you tell me, in which case, okay, well, then you got to go down to talk to the principal about this. School rules are not something I make up. It's the school. School principal will have a nice conversation, try again to persuade the student to follow the school rules so the student can go back to the classroom and continue the teaching and learning. If the student continues to choose not to follow that school rule, well, then the next step, as in all of the school rules, is a call home to the parent. Listen, you gotta come get your child because he's not following school rules.
Okay. Yeah, Amy.
Just to follow up on that, like, let's say, I mean, there are some kids out there that I've heard, they maybe get dizzy from wearing them, or have other side effects from wearing them. Is that something, like, rather than the principal's office, we can, obviously on a case-by-case basis assess things and say, okay, this student needs to go to the nurse's office because this seems to be, a health-related issue, and they need to go there to have an opportunity to have a mask break or something.
Oh, okay, good, really good point. Mask breaks are a totally different matter. We allow for mask breaks. We always have. We have this year. You just got to be distanced from somebody. A mask break does not carry on for 4.5 hours, but a mask break is absolutely an opportunity to just take a little break. But you got to be away from people. And we did this year. No problem. Totally allowed. And you don't have to leave the classroom to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Jim? Okay. Well, as I stated earlier, we're going to take a formal vote on the health and safety plan as well as the teaching and learning plan a little bit later this evening. But at this point, we are at the first public comment period where we'll hear comments on agenda items only. And because I know that the health and safety plan is a hot topic, like I did last week, I'm going to be relaxing our normal maximum of 5 speakers on the same topic. But again, I will cap the first public comment period to 30 minutes max. So just like normal, anyone wishing to make a comment can use the raise hand feature in Zoom. And we'll take comments in the order that hands are raised. And when your name is called, please unmute, state your name, municipality of residence, and the agenda topic for which you want to comment. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes, after which your mic may be muted. And note that it is the board's practice not to engage in back and forth dialogue with speakers. And checking my watch, the time is now 8:46. We'll take comments up until 7:46 p.m. right now. And we'll take comments for up to half an hour, which will take us to 8:16. So I'm going to check the queue to see if we have any speakers, and I see several. And we'll start off with PB.
Good evening. This is Leda Bluebell. Everybody can hear me, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to say that I'm going to be speaking regarding to the mask situation. Upper Dublin, North Penn, Hatboro, Horsham, Colonial, and several Souderton as well. There's a bunch of schools that are mask optional for next year. And as far as school rules are concerned, aren't school rules in the student handbook? And if they are, is there anything in there about masks? Just want to talk about masks real quick. Masks are hindering a student's academic learning. Masks are creating a bullying environment. Masks are creating internal fears. Masks are creating dental issues. Masks are creating medical issues. Masks are creating divisiveness. Masks are suppressing a student's confidence. Also, the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness are stifled when children wear masks. These are many long-term damaging reasons as to why the prevention is worse than the virus. If masks are effective in protecting against COVID-19, then the schools that are not enforcing them should have high number of cases, which will force a school shutdown. This has yet to happen in the US or internationally. Children are 0.00 to 0.025% of all COVID deaths in the US, and 8 states reported 0 child deaths this year. Wissahickon needs to give the mask decision to the parents. Parents need to teach their children how to keep themselves safe, as most do for an allergy. Reminder, free appropriate public education is the law. Masks and vaccines are recommendation. Tonight, please vote on mask choice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kara Finn.
Hi again, Kara Finn, Lower Gwinnett. I will have 2 children in elementary school this coming year. As you can guess, I'm commenting to voice my support for the administration's proposed health and safety plan. The CDC released guidance less than 2 weeks ago advising universal indoor masking for all unvaccinated students, teachers, and staff this coming school year. The AAP released guidance just yesterday advising universal indoor masking for all students, teachers, and staff within schools, regardless of vaccination status. They both stress the importance of being in school with proper precautions. Note that personal preference in regards to masks does not have a place in public health recommendations. There is no agenda behind these recommendations other than protecting the physical and mental health of our nation's children. These recommendations come from the top experts in the nation. You can be assured that these experts have access to all of the data available, including any evidence that might show drawbacks of masks. If there were significant drawbacks to masks, or if they didn't work to reduce the spread of COVID in schools, you would be seeing different recommendations from these experts. The administration's plan is a compromise, as Dr. Crisfield mentioned. If you look at the plan in light of the newest AAP recommendations, as well as the newest CDC recommendations, if we followed the AAP guidance, there would be mandatory masking through all age groups. Setting all of that aside, making masks mandatory for K through 6 gets 329 more students physically into schools than making them optional would. If you vote to support this plan, 329 more children will receive the best education and the numerous mental health and social benefits of being in person. How could you not support it? Thank you for your time and for all that you do for our community.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kirsten.
Hello.
Hello.
The common ground that's being discussed is the common ground.
Sorry, can you please state your name?
This is Kirsten in Whitpeen Township. The common ground being discussed seems like it's what is more convenient for the district, which is as few virtual students as possible. It cannot be based on data. If it was, you'd know the answers to the following. What are the results from the last year of states and counties that allowed in-person schooling? How did mask mandated versus mask optional schools differ empirically when studied? What are the harms of long-term forced masking on children? Masks were a crutch to keep 50% of the population participating in society. The CDC has never provided definitive proof that they work, just statements that they do. They are not standardized. Requiring an unstandardized apparatus that restricts breathing and does not allow for the full human communication experience should probably be at least standardized and proven. We have never required the CDC to provide the burden of proof on masks. However, no masks are the status quo. The burden of proof should be on proving that they're effective and that they are safe. There's no definitive data for either of these issues, let alone in children. Without a mask mandate by the federal or state government, you are acting as individuals personally liable for making this decision for an entire district population, a population where almost half do not support forced masking of children. Are you that confident in your decision that you are not causing harm physically and psychologically? Are you educated about the effects of reduced oxygen on a developing brain and body? How about the effects of covering the human face on developing social and communication skills? The children have been largely unaffected by the virus itself and have contributed minimally to its spread. There is data on that. It is not our children's job to protect us. They deserve a normal experience, or at the very least, undeniable evidence that an intervention will make any sort of impact and cause them absolutely no harm. And you can provide neither. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jason Bobby.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jason Bobby from Whitpeen Township. I want to discuss limits on the requirements for masking. Throughout the entirety of our history, mankind has fought disease. There were flu seasons that had much greater impact on children in our communities than did COVID-19. The CDC and the World Health Organization declared a pandemic for the 2009 H1N1 flu. According to the CDC, the 2009 H1N1 flu was responsible for 358 pediatric deaths. Perhaps I'm giving prior boards too much credit, but I suspect at no point in the midst of those terrible flu seasons in 2009 would a board have given the slightest thought that their powers would allow them to force masks upon the entire school population, whether someone was sick or not. As an attorney, I can rationalize the legal justification that extraordinary measures were permitted in the previous school year based on the emergency disaster declaration in the Commonwealth. On June 10th, the Pennsylvania legislature voted to end Governor Wolf's emergency disaster declaration that had been put in place on March 20th of last year. At the end of June, the mask mandate that had been in place through much of 2020 and early 2021 was lifted across the Commonwealth for all manners of businesses, as well as public and private gatherings. The reality we face today is that the public and their elected representatives in this state have deemed that the benefits of mask wearing, even among unvaccinated individuals, does not outweigh the disruption of civil liberties. Today, me and my 3 children may go to Phillies games and sit next to 40,000 other attendees. We may go to restaurants and dine indoors. We may go to church, libraries, birthday parties, and swimming pools without the burden of masks, despite the emergency use vaccine not being available to them. It is only in the public schools that my children will be required to wear masks. And from what I'm hearing and people have said tonight, Wissahickon is alone among the neighboring school districts. My children all attend a K-5 school, and based on the proposal put forth by Superintendent Crisfield, they will be required to wear masks based on the argument that they are not eligible for the vaccine. Conversely, children over 12 are permitted mask choice regardless of their vaccination status. Similarly, teachers in K-5 are required to mask even when vaccinated, while their coworkers in higher grades do not bear this burden. This is not a requirement put in place by the state. This is the sole choice of the school board assembled here today. The burden isn't attached to any rational concern about contagion among unvaccinated students, as older children that are not vaccinated by their choice are treated differently from younger children that may not yet receive the treatment under FDA emergency authorization. The burden placed upon my children by this school board is distinct and separate from any burden imposed on other persons or classes of persons in similar places of public congregation. This is in direct violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The board has heard many arguments discussing the pros and cons of masks from many well-informed parents, but I fear you may not have considered the legal ramifications that approval of this plan may bring. Good intentions and trying to placate as many survey takers as possible does not supersede constitutional rights vested in me, my children, their teachers, and countless others adversely burdened by the policies you will attempt to put in place this evening. I recommend the board vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alexis Wasserman.
My name is Alexis Wasserman, and I am a resident of Whitpain Township. I am also a parent of 2 elementary school children, and I am speaking about the health and safety plan. Thank you for a proposed health and safety plan which allows as many of our students as possible to return to in-person learning in an environment that is as safe as possible. I would like to note that in addition to making in-person learning accessible in general, the requirement for masking also minimizes the risk of sudden school closures and quarantines, which threaten to disrupt in-person learning throughout the year. I truly appreciate the additional effort taken by the administration and the board to conduct a survey which allowed the K-6 parents to express their wishes rather than caving to pressure from a very vocal minority. Therefore, I strongly urge the board to vote in favor of the proposed plan, which follows CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines for our elementary schools, and also follows the majority of parent wishes in our district. I would also encourage the administration to consider any additional ways in which we can continue to keep our children safe in the face of increasingly more contagious viral variants. Many of these might have already been introduced last year, but I wanted to ensure that they continue to be considered and implemented where practical, especially given the increased number of people who will be in the school building. Such measures could include maximizing outdoor time, even including outdoor lunch or snack if feasible, adding portable HEPA filters to common spaces like higher risk cafeterias and gyms. I heard the conversation earlier where it was said it might not be possible for classrooms, but certainly there are some higher risk areas that we could consider. Also, could we minimize crowding in hallways? For example, slightly staggering bus arrival or dismissal times to help avoid that crowding. And finally, parental notification of a COVID case within our child's classroom, regardless of when positive results are received or what is considered to be close contact, similar to what would normally be sent home in any regular school year for strep or flu. Thank you again for your leadership and for keeping our kids safe in these uncertain times.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Katie W. Katie W., are you there?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Katie Wenger. I'm a resident of Whitpain Township and a parent in the school district. I have to go outside of my planned speaking points tonight so that I can assure you that masks do not enhance mental health. They significantly harm it. Spreading that information is incredibly damaging to be telling the people of this community. And being in that field, I can tell you the fallout that I have seen from everything with the pandemic on mental health, and surely on the mental health of our children, as well as masks, their social isolation. And we have known in the field of psychology for a very long time that social and emotional bonding, even between friends, kids on the playground, occurs by reading facial expressions, occurs by seeing another child smile at them or being able to see them speak. So please know that masks do not enhance mental health. Again, they significantly harm it. So I'm obviously here to advocate for mask choice for children in grades K through 6 for the upcoming school year. With the wealth of information available as to how most masks are not effective and how they are very detrimental to our children, I was very surprised of this proposed plan to continue masking our youngest students. The long-term effects of their faces being masked much of the day and seeing mostly masked faces will be seen in years to come. And experts in the field of speech, psychology, and healthcare continue to state these unfortunate repercussions. I never expected that we would come to a time where the decisions that we make as parents for our children would be overridden and ignored. With parents on both sides of this issue, the only clear resolution is to allow parents the choice over whether or not to mask their children. Our children are now used to spending the summer maskless in stores, in restaurants, on vacation, at the pool, at camp, with family, with friends, and at community events. And now we are being told to acclimate them once again to an unnatural, unhealthy practice that will impact them for many years to come. Not to mention the numerous studies showing how the bacteria on their masks, breathing in increased levels of carbon dioxide and lower levels of oxygen impacts their physical health. How as parents can we tell our children to follow this masking practice when there is no rational explanation for why this is being forced upon them? The World Health Organization and UNICEF state a few very important points: that the decision to use masks for children aged 6 to 11 should be based on the following factors: whether there is widespread transmission in the area where the child resides, and the potential impact of wearing a mask on learning and psychological development, and in consultation with teachers, parents and caregivers, and/or medical providers. So I think that's very important to take note of as well. I will also state that this is the time for our leadership and school board to demonstrate who they're putting first: our children, their students. Please be the leader so that now and in the future, our children can retain the trust that they have in school administrators, principals, and teachers. A trust that has already been deeply damaged by being reprimanded for taking a mask break. And yes, that was happening this year. They were not always allowed mask breaks, and it differed very widely between teachers. And they were even sent to the principal's office for this, as we mentioned.
Thank you for your comments.
Joe Antonio, his time is up.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Jen.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's Jen Dobin, Whitpain Township. I am also speaking on the mask. A couple things that I want a lot of people to understand: that the parents that are against mask wearing, we're not all necessarily saying that we don't want to mask our children. We are saying that it's our choice as parents, not anybody else's choice. The other thing I want to point out is how completely irrational or illogical it is that the masks that these children are wearing are cloth masks that are bought on Etsy, Target, wherever. The ones that look like they're surgical masks, although they're not, they don't protect against COVID. They don't protect you from getting it. They don't protect anybody from, or you from giving it to anybody. So it doesn't make sense. You're going to require masking for protection, but yet the N95s are the only masks that I know of that are actually proven to protect the person wearing it and the people around them. And it also doesn't make sense that we're going to go back to standard distancing, standard class sizes, if that's what I heard correctly earlier, but require masks. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joe Wenger.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Antonio. My name is Joe Wenger. I am a resident of Whitpain Township, and I have 2 children in the district and another child in preschool. First, before I go through prepared remarks, I just wanted to say that I agree fully with the parent who went before me. I think her name was Jen. The cloth masks are really very ineffective at stopping any viral particles. Anyone who's done any construction work will tell you that anything less than an N95 mask will not stop drywall dust, and viral particles are they're a fraction of the size of drywall dust. So just wanted to make that point. I also wanted to say that I agree fully with the comments of my wife, Katie. I better say that, right? With the current success of the vaccination programs in our area and around the country, many of us now enjoy a return to as normal of a life as we've seen since 2019. We go to the grocery store, work, family cookouts, vacations at the beach, all without having to wear these facial coverings that were introduced into our lives in 2020. Those coverings had the purpose of slowing the spread of the virus. However, with the widespread adoption of the vaccination program, every single person over the age of 12 who wants to be vaccinated has had the opportunity to become vaccinated for months now. I humbly petition the board to adopt mask choice for the following reasons. I would like for a second for us all to consider the downside of masking our children. Much social learning occurs through communication amongst peers, and much of that communication is nonverbal. Social psychologists have estimated that up to 50% of all communication is from nonverbal cues and gestures. The conveyance of emotion through facial expression is something that children learn as they grow up, and even adults, at least the smart ones, continue learning throughout their lives. Anyone who doubts the value of nonverbal communication has never felt the joy of a child who has received positive nonverbal feedback from an adult through just a smile or laughter. Also, peer bonds between students are an extremely important aspect of learning. The downsides are not just on the emotional level, however. Consider too that mask wearing over long periods of time reduces oxygen to the brain. This has already been acknowledged by the administration by the need for occasional mask breaks. We've all seen that the masks our children wore last year, and even maybe the ones we wore ourselves, end up being filthy. They probably harbor more bacteria and other pathogens best kept away from our airways. In closing, I would like to point out that many of the surrounding school districts and parochial schools have opted for mask choice to start the school year. To do otherwise in our district would be a disservice to our children and a disservice to freedom of choice itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shannon Taylor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Shannon Taylor, Lower Gwinnett Township. I have 2 children at the elementary level, and something I just wanted the board to consider, if they haven't already, is to possibly make masking optional at the beginning of the school year. And then rather than wait until January to reevaluate in November as flu season begins and start to ramp up, because then that would give our students the option to see their classmates, know who their classmates are at the beginning of the school year, have that facial recognition, and then they would also be able to see their teachers as well, get that positive feedback from them, learn their entire facial expressions. So should we have to go back to mandatory masks, they would at least have that skill under their belt. So I would really like to see masking be optional, definitely at the beginning of the school year, and reevaluated much earlier than January. This would also then do what Dr. Crisfield's trying to do and sort of weigh both sides and try, I mean, you're not going to be able to fully, but make everybody happy to give parents a little bit of choice. So if that hasn't already been considered, I would like you to think about that for the beginning of the school year. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carrie C.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Carrie Coleman from Whitpain Township. I've got 2 kids in elementary and 4 in the district, and 1 who will be starting school. I want to share a few of my thoughts on the question of universal masking, and I think it's best to think in terms of trade-offs. What do we gain and what do we lose if we require this of all students? I'll start with what we're losing. There have been loads of studies. I'm not going to go into them. People have already mentioned the negative effects from headaches and difficulty concentrating, less happiness, and more. Wearing masks is not going to kill our children, but that doesn't mean that requiring them to mask is without harm. There is a trade-off. There is a loss, and I've seen the negative effects in my children, my nephews, my nieces, and my children's friends. It may not seem dire to you, but as a parent, the issue is dire to me. My job isn't just to keep my child alive, it's to do everything I can to help them flourish. So much of what is good in life cannot be quantified on a survey or a spreadsheet. Things like my children seeing their friends spontaneously smile when they make a joke, a subtle glance and expression of approval from a teacher, a silly face from a lunch lady, a whisper between friends, an environment that feels warm and welcoming rather than cold and threatening. This question of masking, as you know, is no small thing. You as the board may not see or be able to tabulate the negative effect of requiring all students to be masked, but as a parent, I've seen the negative effects of masking. I've seen the tears at the end of the day when my daughter describes the headache she couldn't get rid of. I've seen the joy in her face when she described how she and her friends found a secret place where they could take down their masks and laugh and talk. I've held back tears when my child burst through the front door describing how she received a hug instead of an air hug. You may think the kids are used to this, and I actually think you're right. They are used to this, but it's not good to be used to this. It's not good that our children are used to hiding in order to enjoy their friends. It's not good that our children are used to pretending to drink water so they can breathe freely. It's not good that they're used to only hearing parts of a conversation. But this is what's happening. We are losing so much. And what are we gaining? The evidence suggests that we're not gaining much of anything. In France, there is a countrywide mask mandate requiring everyone to wear masks. This is much more strict than the US, but guess who's exempt? Kids under the age of 12, because they know it's not worth it. Kids are not getting COVID and they are not spreading it at that age. The trade-off is not worth it for what we're losing. When we require universal masking in schools, we're losing something that is unquantifiably significant, and what we gain is statistically insignificant. I urge you to please look past the politics, the dollar signs, the rhetoric, and please vote for our kids to get a normal school year next year. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more speaker, and that is Quinn and Blair Holtkamp.
Hi, this is Alexis from Ambler. Hope you guys can hear me okay. I just want to say quick, I applaud you guys last year for bucking the trend and being the only school in our area that opened up for in-person education. You made a point then of saying that our top priority here in Wissahickon is to get kids in the classroom. We want them in the classroom learning. And we made that happen last year. My kids were virtual, and I was in awe of how well it went in person. There was times that I considered switching. The virtual program they did was great. That being said, this year we're ready to go back to the classroom. As are a lot of students, I think. We're ready. We're seeing COVID changed and we're willing to change with that. That being said, we did something different last year. It increased kids getting into the classroom. This year, the plan right now is meeting what the CDC and AAP recommend for masking. They're saying put on masks and get kids back in the classroom. And that's exactly what WIS is looking at. Let's get kids in the classroom, however that may be. The other thing with removing masks is we're also talking about increasing class sizes and removing other mitigations that made it successful last year. So if we need to remove all those other mitigations to get kids back, unfortunately, that means that we have to keep some of them. And in this case, it's masks. We're going to keep masks. We're going to get all these kids back in the classroom. And unfortunately, right now, that's as close to normal as we're going to get for a little while. Because as much as all of us want things to be normal, we're not quite there yet. Let's get all the kids back in the classroom with masks. Let's keep the schools open. Last year, we only had one outbreak at Lower Gwinnett Elementary, and that was with masks in place. I can only imagine that this coming school year, if we remove all mitigations, I'd gamble that we're likely to have more closures and have to switch back and forth to virtual. Nonetheless, keep doing what you guys are doing. Don't be afraid to stand apart and do something a little bit different. Thank you.
Thank you. So that wraps up the first public comment period of our agenda. I know there are a few other hands raised that we did not get to in the 30 minutes allotted, but we will have a second public comment period at the back half or towards the end of our meeting. So with that, we're going to move on to the board president report. And no changes from what we discussed last week. There's only one action item that's up for a vote tonight, and it's the approval of resolution number W-13-21, emergency declaration pursuant to section 520.1 of the Pennsylvania School Code per document 6-1. And again, this is in essence authorization for us to count virtual instruction days as actual school days. At least give us that option during the coming school year. So with that, I'm going to ask for a motion for approval of action item 6B1.
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I'm going to hand it off to Jim for the superintendent report and the vote that I guess most of us are waiting for.
Okay, thank you. There are no information items, but on the 4 action items, there actually is some bold words because we have names identified with the 2 vacancies. And I'd just like to say a couple words about each of the candidates because I can't tell you how excited we are to welcome them both. Actually, welcome one to Wissahickon and welcome one to a new position in Wissahickon. So as you see on the agenda, for our new position, Director of Equity and Cultural Responsiveness, is my recommendation that we hire Ms. Keziah Latour, who is coming to us from Radnor, but also coming to us after a rather incredible teaching career in Cheltenham. And Ms. Latour got right out of Penn State and jumped into teaching with a passion that was evident. And we know of her teaching in Cheltenham, and then she took some leadership roles in Cheltenham and started to display how or why matters of equity and inclusiveness are important to her. And then she moved over to be an assistant principal over in Radnor for a couple of years. And there it really took off. And her role in various committees, groups, district-wide initiatives, she was the diversity, equity, and inclusion officer at the high school, really gave her great, really helpful grounding in this. And then when we will formally introduce her to everybody in person in August, or perhaps if she can't quite get here, maybe September, but you'll see, she has a passion for this. She's engaging. She wants to go out and meet everybody in every school on day one. And I have to try to, Dr. Dewan and I are going to have to try to convince her that's not possible. But then she also wants to branch out into the community and make connections there. It's exactly what we're looking for and a director of equity and cultural responsiveness. So Ms. Latour, I look forward to having everybody meet her. She's the one name that we didn't have on the agenda last meeting because we were still in process. And then the other name that wasn't on there is that of Angela Farlow. And you may, that name is probably familiar to many because after Angela earned her degree from Delaware in elementary education, she started out as a teacher in elementary grades in Philadelphia, moved over to us in the middle school as a teacher of language arts, and quickly became cemented as one of the very best teachers we have. And she, over the last couple of years, has actually been assistant principal at middle school, demonstrating her leadership skills. So this is an example of a promotion, internal promotion. So we'll welcome Angela to a new position, but she's going to be great at Bluebell. She understands teaching. She's got an enthusiasm. The staff is already aware of her recommended name, and they're very fired up to have her. And so I'm very excited about these two new leaders coming to us, and I look forward to everyone seeing them. I didn't feel like an introduction Zoom would be first choice, so we'll do that when we go back to in person in August or September. Okay. So with that, the four motions are the same as we reviewed on Monday night, with the exception of those two names added. So I would ask, please, for approval of action items. Oh, yes. Yes.
Can I ask that, for the board, that we split out items 1 and 2 separately from items 3 and 4?
Sure.
Because what I'd like to do is conduct a roll call vote for the first two.
Okay.
The health and safety plan and the teaching and learning plan, and then we can do a regular vote for items 3 and 4.
Right. So do 1 and 2 together, though.
Yeah, unless any board members want me to split 1 and 2 separately. Are you okay with 1 and 2 together?
You're kind of
Yeah, sure.
All right, then, please, I would ask for a motion for approval of action items 7B1 and 7B2.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments?
I have one thing that I'd like to listening to some of the parents. Somebody suggested, which I think is a very good idea, the HEPA filters, since they're not the units, since Wade was saying it wasn't really feasible to have them in all of the classrooms. Maybe we look at having them, if they're not already there, in the lunchrooms and the gyms where more of the kids are congregating together. Would that be something that we could look at doing?
Sure.
Is that a yes?
Yes, it is. I think it's a good idea. We will look into that.
Okay, thank you.
Amy?
I just wanted to make sure we have ample extra masks at the school, correct? If students would misplace one, or if somebody would have a dirty mask and would need a new mask, we have extra masks that we can offer the students, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and are we encouraging our teachers to have outdoor time for classrooms rather than always having it in the classroom, but taking the students outside to teach some lessons?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And if they're when they're going outside for these lessons and for when they're eating lunch and when they're having recess, they're going to be unmasked, so they'll be seeing their classmates at those times without masks?
Yes.
Any other comments? I just want to comment, for me personally, and I know with my fellow board members, we've gotten dozens and dozens of emails from the community expressing opinions and perspectives on the health and safety plan, in particular with masks and what our policy is going to be for the fall. I know I personally have read all of them, even though we don't respond to all of them. We do receive the emails, and we do take those into consideration as we think amongst ourselves and try to decide how we're going to vote. The recommendation that's before us that Jim has presented is, again, his professional opinion and judgment, the best overall compromise and seeking common ground, while at the same time bringing the most kids back to in-person learning, which we know is better than the virtual or hybrid learning that many kids had to experience in the past year. You know, we know that there are a lot of people who feel very strongly and passionate about each side. No matter what we do as individuals and as a full board, some people are going to be unhappy. In my view, for me, what it comes down to is I'm voting based on what I think makes the most sense and does the most good for the most students and families in Wissahickon. Each board member I encourage each board member to do the same, you know, vote your heart and what you think is the best. And I know that we, as a district in Montgomery County, are once again, just like last year, kind of bucking the trend, and that many districts all around us are going with masks optional. I don't know the specifics of their school boards, their school communities, or what's happening over there in their discussions. But what I do know is what's going on here and the arguments that Jim presented and my own personal perspective as a parent and board member. So to me, that's what's most important, as opposed to what other districts may be doing and the circumstances and context, which I'm not aware of. So again, a lot's
Wait,
been
Joe, one more thing. I just wanted to check with Jeff Sultanic and just check in with him to see, because one of the parents brought up about this being a legal issue. I just wanted to make sure that it is not a legal issue, whatever the vote goes here, or however the vote goes.
Is my opinion that regardless of the determination of the board with respect to the health and safety plan or what is incorporated in the health and safety plan, including whether or not masks are mandatory for a certain group of individuals versus not mandatory versus for a certain group of individuals, that it does not present a legal risk on the part of the school district. At one point in time, I think somebody said that we're liable for the medical conditions of certain individuals who might contract illnesses as a result of wearing masks. We are protected under the doctrine of sovereign immunity and the Political Subdivision Tort Claims Act under Pennsylvania law for those kinds of liabilities. And I am not aware of any successful Equal Protection Act claim against the school district about creating a separate class of students versus others who need to wear masks versus who don't need to wear masks. And we have authority, notwithstanding the change in authority in the state under Section 5-510 of the Public School Code of 1949 to impose regulations regarding the actions and deportment of students. So to make a long story short, I do not believe that there is a foreseeable risk of liability as asserted by certain members of our community.
okay. Well, again, a lot's been said about the health and safety plan and masks and so forth for the year. I think it's time to vote. So I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Katie, please.
Mr. Badger,
I vote in favor of the district's recommendation.
Mr. Bleefeld,
I vote in favor of the recommendation.
Mr. Frank,
I'm in favor of the recommendation.
Mrs. Ginsburg,
I vote in favor.
Mrs. Heyman,
I vote in favor also.
Ms. Karianakis,
In favor.
Mr. Stoloff,
In favor?
Mrs. Walsh,
In favor.
Mr. Antonio.
In favor.
9 in favor and 0 no's.
All right, thank you. So the health and safety plan and teaching and learning plan are approved.
Okay, thank you. And we have the two other items in my report, which are the two personnel appointments. So to that end, I'm asking please for a motion for agenda items 7B3 and 7B4.
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments, questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, and congratulations to our two new hires. Okay, well, that takes us then to the Assistant Superintendent report. Wenyewe?
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I have no informational items and no action items at this time.
Okay. The Board Solicitor report. Jeff?
I'm missing my agenda. I want to be sure that I don't have anything on the agenda. That's the problem. I've been.
There's nothing noted. So unless you have anything to add,
I have no additional wisdom to share with the board. Thank you.
okay. The Board Secretary report. Wade?
No informational items, and we request approval of items 10B1 through 3, which have not changed since the last meeting.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion has been approved and seconded. Any comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And Wade, can you continue with the Board Treasurer report, please?
Thank you. There's no informational item or voting items for the treasurer tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Then the Director of Human Resources report. Danielle?
Thank you. Good evening. Tonight, there's no informational items. Since the work session on Monday, there was only one change that is highlighted under 12B1. And tonight, I'm requesting approval of action items 12B1 through 12B7.
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments, questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. The Communications Committee report. Zephy, anything new?
Nothing for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The Curriculum and Technology Committee report. Ronnie?
There are no informational items. Dr. Dewan, there's plenty for you.
Yes, thank you. We have two action items. Item 14B1 is the approval of the increase of tuition costs for the Montgomery County Community College Gateway to College dual enrollment partnership that we have. And this additional increase is not to exceed an additional $4,200. There was some miscommunication or misunderstanding on that last at our work session. So we wanted to clearly articulate that here. So this is an increase to what was already approved by the board. So the increase is not to exceed an additional $4,200. And then item 14B2 is newly added, and this is an approval of an agreement between Aldersgate Youth Bureau and Wissahickon School District for mental health services. This is to provide services for our students to continue throughout the entire 2021-22 school year. And the amount is not to exceed $20,480 per document 14-1.
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments? Amy, I see your hand raised. And then
Yes.
Zephy?
Dr. Dewan, I just had a question with the Aldersgate contract. How do parents go about requesting the services that they're offering?
They can contact their school counselor. Our schools have been actively connecting with families for students that are on our counselors' radar, but families can certainly contact their counselors directly to inquire about those services throughout the summer as well as throughout next school year.
And what locations will they be at? Will it just be the elementaries, or do we have middle school also?
In all of our schools.
Every school has one.
There's a specific schedule. Therapists will be available 2 days per week for the secondary students and 1 day per week for the elementary students. And of course, this is in addition to the services that our school counselors can provide throughout the school year as well. So this is an additional service, but they will be available at all of the schools.
Okay, great. For some reason, I thought it was at only 2 of the schools. So I just want to make sure it was at all of them.
Okay, no, absolutely. Thank you.
Debbie, do you have a question?
Yeah, quick question. Is this, do folks need to, or parents, students need to request this? And do they have to meet a certain threshold of need to get this service? Or is this open to any student who wants it?
It's certainly open to families to inquire, and the conversation with the school counselor will help best to direct what specific services a student might need. But there's no restriction around it though, no. That conversation is important for families to engage with the school counselors to understand what are the best services that are available for students.
And then a quick follow-up on that. Can a student, like maybe like an older middle high school, make this request without a parent consent?
I believe a parent consent is required for this service. But again, this is in addition to the services our schools provide through our school counselors. I can seek confirmation on that, but I believe there is a parental consent is required for this particular service.
Okay.
And David, you have a question too?
Yes, thanks, Joe. Along the same lines, I'm presuming that teacher referrals would be also an avenue to receive these services. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I do have confirmation parental consent is required for the services through Aldersgate.
Okay, the earlier motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. Okay, that takes us to the Facilities and Transportation Committee report. Tracy?
Thank you. I'm looking for approval of action items 15B1 through 3. There are no changes from last week.
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. All right, we're at the Finance Committee report. David?
Thanks, Joe. I'm going to turn this over to you, Wade. I see one of our action items is bolded. So would you?
I verbally explained what the change was going to be, and it is just now reflected in the document. So it's 2% and 2% in years 3, I think it's 4 and 5, as I discussed at the last meeting. So no change for the verbal.
Okay. And then I think there may be some interest in pulling action item 2, approval of a tax penalty waiver out separately. So I'm going to ask for a motion to consider action item 16B1 and 3. Did I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, and then the last action item to consider would be 16B2.
So moved.
Second.
All right, that motion has been moved and seconded. Any comments? Ron?
Yeah, has any more information been developed since we last discussed this item?
No, I think it was Mr. Antonio had requested to find out about additional communication, and that has been, I don't have anything definitive that I would say is easy for me to say, yes, this is what happened or didn't happen. There seems to be a difference of opinion between two parties. And the question is whether or not the ABE property owners did in fact mail in a proper manner the tax payment, and why wasn't it received by the tax collector as such? And I don't think I am going to know that answer.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, Amy, go ahead first.
No, I just wanted to confirm. I think it was said at the last meeting, the township has agreed to waive their penalty, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just to make sure.
Yeah.
Wait, have they been a taxpayer before, and have they ever been late on any of their payments?
It's an actual interim bill. So on this property, I don't think they've ever paid.
Yeah, but I think it's
Right,
a new development.
Yes, but other properties. Would you know that?
I probably would know it and I'm not aware of it, but it's possible they have smaller properties.
Based on the information that we had received from the tax collector as well as the tax property owner, as Wade said, I think it's a little bit of he said, she said. So it's hard to know definitively, like, whose fault it is, so to speak. But personally, my read of the situation is that there was a good faith effort to try to mail the tax bill on time and before the penalty phase. Who knows exactly what happened since then and whose fault it was. But again, because there was a good faith effort to mail the tax bill on time, I would be comfortable and am going to vote to waive the penalty portion of the tax bill.
And they did state that in the future they were going to do registered mail to make sure that it's received, correct?
I believe so. Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, should I do a roll call vote? Maybe just to make it cleanest. Katie, can you conduct a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Bleefeld?
Yes.
Mr. Frank?
No.
Mrs. Ginsburg?
Yes.
Mrs. Heyman?
Yes.
Ms. Karyonikis?
Yes.
Mr. Stoloff?
Yes.
Mrs. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Antonio?
Yes.
We have 8 yes and 1 no.
Okay, the motion passes. And that takes us to the policy committee report. Marshall, anything tonight?
I have nothing tonight. Thank you.
Okay, racial equity oversight committee report. Paul, anything new to report?
Nothing new tonight. Thanks.
Okay, then the report of board representatives. Any updates on meetings since last week?
I have none.
Same here.
None.
Okay, so then that takes us to the second public comment period of the evening, where we'll hear comments on any school-related topic. Anyone wishing to make a comment can use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and we'll take comments in the order that hands are raised. And when your name is called, please unmute, state your name, municipality of residence, and your topic. A maximum of 5 speakers on the same topic will be allowed. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, after which your mic may be muted. And note that it is the board's practice not to engage in back and forth dialogue with speakers. So once again, I'm going to check the list. We have a few names. And our first one is Maureen Boga.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. I'm Maureen Bogut. I am Whitpain Township. I'm talking to the health and safety plan that was just voted upon with, I can't believe none of you dissented. I'm just shocked by that because, I mean, you are basically spitting in the faces of 50% of the school district, because if you take the 6% or whatever that didn't really care, it's basically to go either direction. 50% who are very concerned about their children having masks for many reasons. These are young children, as we know, learning language. I mean, it's a big issue, okay? And their children are also, right now, as everybody pointed out, have been fully engaged in society without any issues. We have a 1% positivity rate in Montgomery County right now. We have in Pennsylvania, I can't even tell you the number, there are no deaths in Pennsylvania in the children under 20. So children are not affected by the COVID, and yet you're still putting these disgusting cloth masks that don't do anything on the children. But I'm getting off topic. What I'm saying is basically, you know, if you give mask option, each person has the chance to send their child in with an N95 if they want, which will protect that child, supposedly. N95s do, and they can be used in children. That would be great. Let the other parents do what they need to do with their children. It's parental rights. It's parental control. This is not a school's decision. This is not something, this has been in such flux and flow that no one can seem to have an agreement about what is, you know, actually truth, except parental rights should trump everything else, especially with someone's putting a mask over their a child's face for the sake of someone else. If someone's wearing their own mask, you should not mandate another child to wear it for you. If they want it, they can wear an N95 or they can wear 2 masks, okay? But do not have them, lord their fears over another parent, telling that parent their child should be masked. It just makes no sense. And I'm very disappointed in the board, and you're going to be hearing from a lot of parents, I can guarantee you. This is really unsatisfactory. You really ignored half of your constituency, half of them. Not one of you seemed to even acknowledge it. It's just really callous. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christine English.
Hi, I'm Christine English. We're in Whitpain Township. I just a couple of things not on the mask topic. Number one was I was wondering if you can alert us or tell us who the replacement will be for Dr. Farlow. Over at the middle school. And also just accessibility with Aldersgate. I'm not sure if anyone's, as parents, have tried to access that, but I don't find it to be that accessible. I did ask about it a couple of times over the years, and it didn't really seem to be fully understood. The other thing is, and the final, is for the equity. I'm wondering if there's been any consideration of our children with LGBTQ needs as well. I do know the importance of the racial equity, but I just was wondering, I haven't heard anything about the LGBTQ, and I know a lot of our children have really been experiencing issues surrounding that, and I'm concerned. Just some feedback I've seen from parents in our community, I'm not so sure that the needs of our kids are being understood. And I'm not sure what the level of professional development has been that's been offered to our teachers. And I was wondering if that could be something looked into, cultural training for our teachers to help them so that they can be a good access point for any students that need help. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael DeGede.
Hello?
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 Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, fine. I just wanted to bring you up to date on this matter because I know of your concern about it.
Can you please introduce?
Friday night, got a message from
Excuse me.
Khrushchev, which
Can you please introduce yourself and your municipality and topic, please?
we then got a message, a public one, the next morning, in which he said he would do that if we
Excuse me.
our missiles from Turkey.
Excuse me. Can
we
you?
then, as you know, issued a
excuse me.
statement that we could
Excuse me.
get into that deal.
I'm going to, when I unmute, can you please introduce yourself again and state your municipality and your topic, please?
No.
The withdrawal of these missiles.
Joe, this is a recording of some type. Please cut this.
Oh, I can't really quite hear it. Okay. Our next speaker is Monique and Ade Galloway. They
Joe,
seem
I
to have
think,
dropped.
yeah, they lowered their hand.
Okay. And then our next speaker is Enver Halil Taraki.
Good evening. In recent months, members of my administration and officials of the
It sounds like a recording.
charged with
Yeah,
involvement.
please cut this.
All right.
These include charges of illegal act.
Okay. Someone's trying to have some fun. And our last speaker, it looks like, is Monique and Ade Galloway again.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about before we couldn't quite figure out how to come off of mute. So I'm
problem.
Monique Galloway. My husband Ade is with me, and we're both residents of Whitpain Township and parents of 2 children attending Wissahickon School District, one in K through 5 and one in the middle school. And I want to thank you all as board members for your thoughtfulness, for bringing everyone together to have these really tough discussions. I'm specifically wanting to talk about the masking item. You know, nothing about being in this pandemic is normal. Nothing about masking is normal. Nothing about these conversations that we're having to have within our communities is normal. But we are very grateful for how you all voted this evening. This past year, sorry, I'm just very emotional about all of this, but this past year, our child who's in elementary school went the entire year in person and wore masks and had mask break and thrived and survived and did extremely well. And as parents, when we entrust you all with our child during the day, it's more than just about our decision as parents. We're entrusting you to make the right choices for when our child is with you, from the time they leave our house to the time they return to us. And we think that you all have done a phenomenal, exceptionally challenging job this year. And we're very grateful that you're continuing to do that. Nothing about this, again, is normal. Nothing about this is easy. And when I hear people in my community say that, oh, children aren't dying for COVID, it truly makes me nauseous, because it's not about whether our children are dying or not. It's about whether they're healthy and whether they're alive. And any parent who has attended this meeting, any one of you on this board who are parents and has been with a sick child at night, has been at the urgent care with your child because they have something as simple as a tough flu or a cold, can only understand when I say to you that my concern is not about whether my child is alive or not. That's a given, right? That's my expectation. It's about whether they are not sick. And if we have to take an opportunity like this to make tough choices, like requiring them to wear masks when it's reasonable and safe for them to do so, then we fully support that. The one thing that I will ask, of course, and I think you all are taking this into consideration, is that if we have any numbers spike in the middle school, that instead of thrusting us into what we experienced last year, where we had to suddenly go into a virtual environment, which was chaotic and less than ideal, that we immediately amend this this current protocol that you just voted upon to consider having a masking requirement be mandated in the middle school. So I also support the other parents' thoughts about the additional air filtrations. I think that's a great idea and should be looked into further. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stephen Oakworth.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday.
Okay. And I think that wraps up the speakers for our second public comment period. That takes us then now to board comments. Any comments from my fellow board members? Yes, Ronnie, and then Zeppi.
As we've heard everyone talk about masks, no masks, why masks, not masks, what comes to my mind, would anyone ask their surgeon or their doctor to take off their mask before they operated? I mean, are masks ineffective, but effective for surgeons and doctors? I think we're making a mistake if we think masks aren't for the good. That's all.
Zeppi?
I just wanted to share that indeed we've received a lot of emails, and I read every single one of them. And I have a full-time job. I'm unable to answer every single email. I read every text, even the ones that come through Facebook. And this wasn't an easy decision, but we really looked at this hard. And I don't think there was any one way that we would make everyone happy. But after reading what the American Academy of Pediatrics announced today, it was kind of hard not to take that into consideration. I really hope that we have a successful 21-22 school year, because that's #1 goal. Thank you.
Tracy? Tracy, you're on mute.
There we go. So a couple of things. Jim, would it be possible for us, like the one parent was just bringing up, if there is a big spike in the middle school, if we could amend this in the future to include everyone in the middle school if necessary? Again, if necessary.
We stand ready to amend anything if there's some agency that declares a mandate. So if we feel the need to do something different, yes.
Okay. And then, like Zephy said, this is not an easy decision. I know one of the parents was on there, she was saying, we didn't listen to 50% of the people, but we did listen to 50% of the people. So it was just the different 50% of the people. So when you say that, we're in a lose-lose situation, really, because no matter what we do, half of the people are going to disagree with us. And I just wanted to also bring up one thing, when we talk about parental rights, and just think if you're changing the words mask fit or masks for COVID optional, change those words to smallpox vaccine or MMR vaccine, when you say that it's our right to do what we want with our children and you have no right to tell us what to do with the children. I'm not saying that we're going to say that your children need to be vaccinated for this, but we do require children to be vaccinated for certain things to protect other children. And that is what we are looking for here when we're making this decision on a mask. We don't take it lightly. Honestly, I would rather not have to do this. I would rather COVID be gone, but it is not. So these are the things that this is what we have to do right now. And I just voted myself. I voted my conscience on what I think would help our children stay safe. And like last year, get the most kids that we can in our classrooms, in person learning. The kids wore masks last year and they were able to do it. It wasn't the best thing in the world. Honestly, we would rather not have this whole situation, but this is what we are. This is what we're in right now. And the kids did it last year, and I'm sure that they will be able to do it this year. And hopefully it won't last long and we can get completely out of it. And then my last comment is the one parent that made a comment about our equity person that we just hired. And yes, it's for equity for all, not just racial equity, but equity for all is what we're looking for. And we're hoping for guidance on if there's things that we're doing that we can change to make sure that that's happening. So just so you know, it is equity for all that we are looking for. And that's it.
All right, Ron.
And the last thing, our job as the school board, as onerous and uncomfortable as it is not a popularity contest. Our job is to educate our students in the safest manner and the best manner possible to protect the entire community, not just to make anybody happy or not happy. I've read all these emails and all these texts and all the posts on social media, and there's been an argument up and down. But the main point is, and I think Tracy made a fantastic point, that while the parents are talking about it is my power to decide what my child will do, as far as public health is concerned, the public health trumps the parents' powers, and the courts have agreed, and morality agrees. If your child is Typhoid Mary, your child does not have the right to come to school without a mask or even be in school. We have to protect our students the best way we can, and that is what we've decided. And if things change between now and January, then we will make the adjustments necessary. But our job is to, as of this date, we are doing what we consider the best move possible. Thank you.
All right. Any other board members? Sachi, any comments?
No, not right now.
Okay. So with that, I guess I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned.